Welcome everybody, this is General Microsoft 365 Development Special Interest Group. This is the bi-weekly sync. It is February 18th, unless I'm completely mistaken. And today we're going to do a quick recap on the latest on the open source projects and assets, and then quick recap on latest on Microsoft Teams samples, and then we'll have a picture time, quick together mode picture with all of the attendees in the call, and then we have 3 demos. So again, we'll try to do the intros and recap on what's happening in open source within 15 minutes together with a picture, and then we'll move into the demos 1/4 on the hour, and then all of the demos have max 15 minutes. Just a reminder for speakers as well, we will have to actually cut you off after 15 minutes. So please try to keep on the timings. But we'll start with Amutrat and then Gary and then Marcin in the end. Now, let's actually do a quick recap on things. So quick recap on opportunities to participate within the community. We are a open source community, and we want our community to be active. So one of the easiest way to actually be active and being part of the community is a volunteer to do a demo of a solution or a technical pattern. So these are great opportunities of getting visibility for you or your solution or your open source solution and so on. It doesn't necessarily have to be an open source solution. It might be a pattern which you learn to use, and then you want to share that with others as well. So please, if you're interested in doing demos, reach out to me, Patrick, Bert, or whoever actually to be in the PnP team, and they can actually get you scheduled on upcoming calls. This is where one of these ways to contribute also is to contribute in GitHub in any of the GitHub locations. We have quite a few of GitHub open source repos which welcome contributions. And the most important piece is always to provide feedback. If something isn't broken or something is broken, you can provide feedback, but also positive feedback is welcome. When you are providing feedback, just as we were discussing before we started recording, it is good to be polite because that's how your feedback is being constructive, and then it actually can have an impact. So let's be nice, let's be polite, let's understand that especially in the open source area, people are actually using their own time for the benefit of the others in the community. So being polite, being positive and constructive is really the key. Now, on the URLs and locations, so quick recap on those as well. So we do have 2 different YouTube channels, one with a Microsoft 365 developer videos, and then one with a community videos more, and that includes also non-development videos. We also have a lot of open source assets and also open source locations available in a GitHub, which are available for you to take advantage. Don't start from scratch. Either use any of the open source GitHub locations or our sample galleries to find a good starting point for your solution, whatever you need to actually build. And because all of these solutions are MIT licensed, you can actually pull them down, you can reuse them within your solutions as well. And then if you consider that there's too many URLs available or mentioned in the slides, AKMS M365 PnP is the one address and one URL address to easily actually access all of the assets within our community. Now, quick recap on something which happened already a few weeks back, but I still kept it on the slides as well. So Viva, Microsoft Viva was announced a few weeks back. It actually have 4 different sections. So there's the Viva Learning, there's the Viva Topics, there's the Viva Analytics, and then there's the Viva Connections. And Viva Connections is something which we will have more and more details available from an extensibility perspective quite soon, but this is basically a way of doing extensibility for Microsoft Teams using SharePoint Framework and then surfacing portal capabilities inside of Microsoft Teams. We will actually have a invitation-only dev kitchen pretty soon with our partners and some of the MVPs, and then we'll open up more information related on this extensibility platform later on the spring. But if you're interested on where we're heading, AKMS Viva Connections is the URL to get more information. Right now, we'll provide absolutely more information immediately when possible, and we can share more. Now, a few other assets and reminders or recaps of the URLs. So AKMS Teams samples. If you're building something for Microsoft Teams, there's already a lot of open source samples available, contributed by Microsoft employees or by the community. And if you go to the AKMS Teams samples, it is a nice gallery where you can actually find what's relevant for you. And that includes bot framework samples, messaging connections, outgoing webhooks or tabs, and all of that, and meeting applications even. So really, really great assets of finding relevant information for you. And the other thing which is really, really cool is that the community helps community to learn. So David, can you do a quick recap on what is sharing is caring?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Vesa. Well, for those that are new and are veterans to the community, it's always good to remember we are an inclusive, as Vesa had mentioned, inclusive community and open source, which means we welcome any and all contributions and using of the tools and resources. But we understand that there can be some hurdles along the way, things like understanding how to use GitHub, navigate that landscape, how to use things like Node if you want to start getting into development. There can be a lot and can be overwhelming. Sharing is Caring is an initiative by the PnP team to provide hands-on guidance. So these are smaller setting sessions where we get together, provide you hands-on lessons, walk you through together. We don't record them, so it's a complete safe space opportunity for you to ask questions of any sort and type. We've just scheduled all of the March sessions, and we've left some room to add some if some of them get a little bit more popular than others or full. So we've got obviously our first-time contributor and community docs who are most popular, SPFx samples within VM and the developer workstation setup, and 2 new ones, More Than Code with VS Code. So if you're looking to utilize it in a way that is beyond just coding, or you also want to get involved as a demoer and do presentations. The first-time presenter, we're going to share some of those tales from the stage, or stories from the stage, if you will. And we also have our Ask Me Anything set up for March as well with SPFX samples. So Hugo will be our guest of honor to answer all those questions you may have around the SPFX samples. The team is growing. Welcome Emily Mancini and April Dunham and Hugo and myself. And of course, one of the newer features just want to mention is office hours. So if you're looking for some one-on-one guidance or tips and some questions you have, just you want to get pointedly answered, those are one-on-one opportunities that you can schedule with. So please take advantage. We'd love to have you, love to help you get more involved. We're all in this together. So aka.ms/sharing is caring. Hope to see you soon. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, David, on that one. Now let's jump then on Bert. So let's do a quick recap on what's happening within the PnP .NET libraries. And Bert?
Yep. First thing, we actually released PnP Framework 1.2. It's like an incremental release. I just want to remind folks that PnP Framework is replacing the old PnP Site Core library. That one is retired. We're not doing any patches there anymore. So please move to this version, and if you have issues with that, there's an issue list where you can ask questions. There's a kind of a lightweight migration guide as well. So please move over to PnP Framework. Now, in the PnP.NET space, what happened for PnP Framework? We shipped 1.2 as mentioned. We're now prepping 1.3. There will be some improvements around Authentication Manager for other clouds. Essentially, if you are using like a government cloud, we had some issues with graph calls. We're using the wrong endpoints. So we're now kind of standardizing that work. So we should be able to get things working, both PnP Framework and PnP PowerShell on other cloud environments. There was a bug around the web plugin in with .NET Framework. So if you use like a PowerShell session with the use web plugin, in .NET Framework, so the old PowerShell 5, then you got some issues. We fixed that, and some other minor fixes. The focus on PnP Framework just stays mainly on the quality handling issues, answering questions, helping folks upgrade. On the PnP Core SDK side, so PnP Core SDK is the new library that eventually will replace PnP Framework, but that will take like a long time. But for that one, we are prepping beta 3, doing like a fairly big refactoring to make the model better and the query engine better. So if you're using today PnP Core SDK, you will see beta 3 introducing some breaking changes, but I think that's for the good because the end will be like a better solution. And yeah, we already crossed 80,000 tenants, just saying. So it's massively being used.
80,000 tenants in a month, right?
In a month,
so
yeah. So 80,000
so not
tenants
overall.
Each month
So
no,
yes.
each month, again and again
Yes.
and again.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. So
Yep.
cool. You've been on a call.
Yep. So we released 1.3.0, which has quite some updates. If you keep track of what we're doing, you'll notice that every time there is a nightly build, we change something. We don't release a nightly build if nothing has changed, but we've been having consistent, almost daily nightly builds. So a lot of things have changed behind the scenes. Among others, what Bert mentioned already, we have better support for environments. Actually, we made today another release, or at least tonight we do another nightly build. We do that obviously during the night. So the release of tomorrow will contain a lot of fixes with regards to graph call handling. We already have 66,000 downloads, going nicely up. Every 2 weeks we add another 25,000 nowadays, and I assume that will go a bit faster. In the current nightly, we introduced a set of 4 new commandlets there. That now help you to set up these new app permissions called sites selected, which works with the graph. So there's 4 commandlets there that help you and talk you through how to do that without actually having to make a raw call to the graph. Of course, small bug fixes, that's ongoing. And that's it for now. So if you want to play around with that new site selected, you want to easily set it up, get the latest nightly.
Excellent. Thank you, Erwin, on that one. And then let's move on quickly on the projects. I'd say Victor Villen on the call.
I'm here.
Okay, Victor.
Cool, thanks. Yes, we did have a big release last week. We released 3.0.0, actually 3.0.1, since Paolo found a small bug that we needed to fix. But anyways, finally, version 3 is here. A lot of changes specifically around the structure. It's a lot of cleanup as well. And also this big release allowed us to clean up some old code, etc. So it should be much more stable, much more better releases, building faster. So there's a lot of benefits of doing this. We also introduced the new quick scaffolding. So with just a few questions, you can set up a new Teams project. Previously, it was like 20, 30 questions with all the advanced options. We added support for the latest schema and JavaScript SDK, etc., etc. And we also have compared to version 2, I had like 200 unit testers. Now it's over 4,000 unit tests. So it's much more test coverage. So we shouldn't slip through that many small bugs. But yes, we're not stopping here. We are continuing adding more stuff. Looking into currently our meeting tab supports and support for multiple manifests coming hopefully in 3.1. I'm also experimenting with importing manifests from App Studio. So you can use the App Studio or Teams.js SDK or Teams Toolkit, for instance, to create and use that visual interface to create your Teams app solution, but then import it into your Teams generator and scaffold out all the necessary code for your declared application. So as always, there's a couple of things in there, both the request for features and shouldn't be that many bugs anymore, but feel free to help out, or you can absolutely help out with the documentation. There's some stuff that we need to update and some things we need to add to it. So go ahead and also use the issues list and continue discussion in the GitHub discussions if there's anything you're thinking about or wanting to have. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Victor. It was really great to see the excitement related on version 3 release. So, and Victor is going to do live demos on that one within the upcoming course as well. So just a teaser on that. Now, it's Beth who's going to do the update on the Microsoft Graph Toolkit.
Yes, hi. So latest update, we are having a version coming up probably next week. So keep on the lookout for that. The newest one and the most exciting one, in my opinion, is the electron authentication provider. And we're also going to have a demo today for that. Marisa is on the call. Our team is very excited about this, and the demo is going to be amazing. So please stay and watch that. It's going to be amazing. Trust me, it will be the best demo ever.
No pressure. No pressure.
But we also, added some features and supports from the community. We still have a lot of people helping us building the toolkit, so thank you all for that. There's going to be the MGT SharePoint package coming up, allowing multiple web parts to register MGT in general, so that's going to be exciting. There's a new thing that I put from the community at the last line of this update. We have MGT React Playground, recently built by Tommy Tavella. hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but it's called the SP editor in Edge extension market. So check that out and see if that can help you build your React plus MGT apps. Yep. That's all from me. Thank you.
And Tommy is, by the way, jumping in to demo that tool within 2 weeks. So we'll demo that live in the community call as well. So it's good to have this community demos. So, but thank you, Beth, on that one. Also, quick update, just to recap on the team samples. We did not have new samples in the AKMS team samples right now, but we do welcome community samples there as well. So we're building kind of a general sample gallery for Microsoft Teams, helping people to start building for Microsoft Teams as well. If you're interested in contributing, please get involved. All good. Now let's do a quick picture time, and I will actually share the together mode. Let's see if we can actually get a working picture, because it shows me 42 people in the call, but somebody said that there's actually 100 and whatever 70 again. But let's do this. We are recording that, and we can actually see the people there as well. And like I say, Todd Clint, somebody was missing you in the early starts, but let's actually wave this. Thanks everybody. It's awesome to see the faces again. It's too bad that there's a limit of 50, so I do apologize if you missed the spot. But thank you, everybody. Good to see the faces. Absolutely brilliant. We'll kind of meet everybody sooner or later, hopefully in a conference, real conference, physically meeting people, which sounds so strange on these days. But we are a few minutes behind of the schedule, which is hopefully fine. Let's actually jump into the Microsoft Graph and Electron provider. So Amruta, I think you're ready to go.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Amruta, and I'm a software engineer on the Microsoft Graph Toolkit team. And I'm super excited to be here to talk to you about our latest addition into the toolkit, which is our Electron provider. So before I start talking about what the provider is, let me give you a brief overview on the toolkit itself. So the Microsoft Graph Toolkit is a collection of UI components and authentication providers that make using the Microsoft Graph super easy. So where the UI components are concerned, these are fully functional right out of the box, and you just have to add about 1 to 2 lines of code to get beautiful data-rich experiences that use data from the graph. So for example, the best place to get started with our components is mgt.dev. You can play with all the components here, you can customize them, and you can use them in your application. So for example, this people picker here fetches data people information from the graph. So it's actually a multi-select dropdown. And all you have to do is include this tag in your HTML script, and you're good to go. Similarly, you have agenda information, and so just with one tag, you get all this beautifully rendered agenda data from the graph. So that's you can play with all the other UI components here, but the other side of the toolkit is authentication providers. So if you can imagine, all these components that you're using in your app, they're all calling the graph, right? And even otherwise, if you're using the graph in any way in your app, you need to be authenticated. So that's where our providers come in. And so we have different authentication providers that, again, make it super easy to get authenticated in your app with Microsoft Identity. And we have different providers for each platform that you may be building on. So for example, if you're building a web app, then you'll be using our MSAL provider. If you're building a SharePoint web part, you'll be using SharePoint provider. And if you're building a Teams tab, then you'll be using a Teams provider. And there's a quick example here. So if you wanted to authenticate on using Microsoft Identity with the graph on your web app, then this is pretty much all the code you need. You just have to say provider.global provider equals new MSAL provider and provide the client ID of your app registration. And what's great about this provider, like I had mentioned before, is that it's not only to get authenticated for your MGT components to work, but this provides an endpoint through which you can call any graph API as well. So without further ado, let me jump into a simple Electron, like boilerplate code that I downloaded. It's pretty much blank and I haven't added any code in it, but I've just npm installed these packages that we would need. And what we're trying to achieve through this app is to make a very simple to-do application that pulls data from your Microsoft To-Do. So yeah, I npm installed these. And for those of you who are new to Electron, Electron is an open source framework that's used to build native applications that are cross-platform because it relies on very fundamental web technology like HTML and JavaScript, and it's based on a Node.js runtime for the backend and a Chromium front end. And it has two kinds of processes, main and renderer. And every Electron app can only have one main process because it's responsible for the life cycle of the whole application. So you can think of main as the back end and renderer is the front end. And you'll have as many renderers as the number of pages. So here we're only looking at one renderer process, one page. So I only have one renderer. And this is I cloned this from a Git repository by Electron, so I haven't added any code here. This is pretty much the boilerplate code that you get. So to start authenticating, that's the first step we're going to do to get authenticated, to be able to use the graph. You need to add two things. You have to initialize, one is the Electron authenticator, and the other is the Electron provider. So the Electron authenticator is going to sit in main.ts, and Electron provider is going to sit in the renderer where all your components are going to be. So let's get started with that. I'm just going to import the authenticator, and I'll talk about what they do in just a second. Import the authenticator, and here I'm going to add config object. So what the authenticator does, Electron authenticator basically does all the work. It's going to set up all your config variables like your client ID, and it's also responsible for getting access tokens for you to be authenticated. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm setting up all the config variables and initializing the Electron authenticator by passing in this config object. Now on the renderer side, the renderer side is actually even easier. This is where we're going to be initializing the Electron provider. So I'm just going to write these import statements really quickly. So I'm importing the Electron provider. I'm also importing the components that we're going to be using in our index.html. And then all I have to do is add this one line of code, and we are authenticated. And now let's go to our index.html, and I'm going to add these components here. Run an npm and start. So what I've added is the MGT login component that's going to help you log in and then display your photo and your name. The MGT person is going to show you some person details of the person logged in, and the to-do is going to show you the to-do tasks of the person. So we have to sign in. I'm going to sign in as Megan. Put the password in. And that's it. That's all you needed to get this beautifully rendered to-do list. And then you can go ahead and customize this. You can add, remove tasks, etc. So that was how to get started with the Electron provider. I also, I built the same app again before this. It basically does the same thing that we saw earlier, except it has one hidden feature that I'm really excited to show you. So right now, Megan is available on Teams, right? She's just doing her work at her normal pace. She has this beautiful wallpaper of Mount Rainier. And then, I don't know about you, but during the pandemic, I have a really hard time focusing. And I usually go into this do not disturb mode when I don't want people pinging me and I'm really trying to get something done. And once I turn to do not disturb, firstly, my app turns to dark mode. And I did this solely for the purpose of showing off the fact that all our MGT components have dark theme enabled. Just by adding a class to each of them called MGT dark, you can get the dark theme. But also when I'm trying to focus, I like to be reminded that I need to be working. So my wallpaper changed to this giraffe that tells me, I'm watching you, get back to work. And similarly, when after work, I try to appear away so that, again, people know I'm done with work. But I have this bad habit of continuing to try, when I'm supposed to be off work, I still try to send the last email, or I'm just not even doing something productive, but I'm still on my laptop. So then my wallpaper changes again to this little cat telling me to work out. So what I'm doing here in the back in the app is that I'm pulling for presence data from the graph to actually change my wallpaper based on what my presence is on Teams. So let me just quickly show you how to do that. So this is the same renderer code that we saw just now, where I'm initializing the electron provider. And all I'm doing is also calling the graph using the endpoint that we saw, that I talked about earlier. The fact that the providers or global provider exposes an endpoint through which you can call any of these graph APIs. And I'm also using, so I want to be able to pull for presence data every 5 seconds. So what I do is I listen to this event. So onState changed is called every time there's a login or a logout event. So I call that event, and then I check if someone's signed in, and I call this check presence function that basically every 5 seconds, because I've set an interval here for 5 seconds, every 5 seconds, I call the presence API and get presence information. And I'm also updating. So as you can see here in the person component, you can update the presence. So manually, so I actually pull that from the DOM. I pull that element from the DOM, and I pass this presence object so that even this is updated every time I pull for presence data. So yeah, that's the end of my demo. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and hopefully it excited you to use the Electron provider. It's going to be released, like Beth said, I think sometime next week. So please stay tuned and let me know if you have any questions, and I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Excellent. Really cool stuff, Amrutha. So,
Thank you.
And great demo, great clarification on how things are working. Really cool stuff. But let's move into the next demo. And by the way, thank you for catching up on the time as well. So we're now again on the schedule, which is absolutely brilliant. So really good. Next demo person would be Marcin. We were seeing you on the call already. You first, and then Gary next. If that's
Oh yes, hello, absolutely. Hello, lovely people, great to be here. Let me share my screen very quickly. In such a case, I think that's it. Quick presentation, because this is the first time I'm here. I will be talking about usage of PnP SPFx controls in development for Microsoft Teams. You will see basically how to easily start your development, how to debug your web part in Teams context. Here I listed few hopefully useful links to the repository, to the sample I will show you, to SPFx controls, the project that I will be using to help myself out with this problem. And finally, Fluent UI North Star, which is basically Fluent UI distribution targeting Teams, very nice, very useful. And finally, browser utilities. This is my internal or my private piece of JavaScript that I usually add to my snippets in browser to help me out a little bit with the debug and with development. I hope you will find it as useful as I'm finding it. 2 words about me. I work at Valo. I also consult a little bit for Avenga. Here are my Twitter, GitHub if you would like to check my other repositories, and link to my blog. And without any further ado, let's jump into the demo. I hope you can see my screen, and you should see Visual Studio Code. Is that right?
Yep. All good.
And already with success. So first of all, let's start with how we can actually quickly start the development for our Teams web part, because official documentation says that you have to upload it, you have to install it, you have to sync it to your Teams, and then it will be available. However, you can actually run gulp serve usually in the browser, and once we will build it, there is relatively easy script. We don't need Workbench to open your web part anywhere. Here I have some pre-existing web part loaded, but not all of you may have this already in. So the easiest way to go is open any team, open any tab that points to SharePoint, and use this magical script I mentioned. As you can see, this is just a few methods. I run it, and what I'm doing is I'm executing debug web part, and I'm providing web part ID from app manifest. Thanks to that, what it will do, it will find the Teams embedded iframe. It will replace the URL with URL to your debug. And as you can see, magically, we get our debug web part, which looks quite nice. Now, what you see here is basically the dashboard that I implemented for SPFx controls React. It allows you to configure this beautiful dashboard, search, filter, option to edit, and stop editing those widgets. Those widgets are initially defined, and as well as the toolbox itself is usually defined in, originally defined in Fluent UI Northstar. Here, there is just a little bit of implementation around that to help you get started with that. And what we did here is, for example, properly decouple the headers from the actual components. Thanks to that, if you load your page, once again, let me debug the web part. Either the state is changing of the parent component. You can see that once loaded, the content will always load. We will render for edit purposes only the header. So this is the first part. Second part I would like to show you is the actual code, how to configure it. The original component is relatively simple. In render method, as you can see, very quick toolbar config. In toolbar config, you define what actions or what actions in which action groups you want to render. So here you can see that, okay, we have something for edit, we have some filters, and we have some search, I hope. On selected, exactly, find true, and on find query, something is happening. In this sample, basically every action is logged to the browser, to the console. So if I open that here, data console, let's clear that. If we select some filter, you will see in the console what was selected. The same with edit. Here you have some predefined options. They do nothing but log the actual object and what was called. So hopefully this will bring you relatively fast up to speed how to reuse that for all your purposes. One more interesting thing that was already implemented here is live change of theme. So if you change to dark mode, you can see that underlying page is also changed, high contrast, everything's already implemented, and you should be very fast, you should be able to start working with that very, very fast. Widgets, what defines widgets? Where are those? Get widgets. We have our title, description, size, and body. So nothing too fancy. Like I mentioned, the important thing is that the content is actually JSX, which allows us to handle this global state change a little bit better. Next, I would like to move forward to why even bother with Fluent UI Northstar. Like, this is beautiful control provided by Fluent UI Northstar. You can see it's very nice, Teams ready, looks very, I would say, Teams native. And there is a lot of controls in Fluent UI Northstar that gives, that are actually having this nice Teams native vibe. If you are developing something for Teams, I would highly encourage you to use this instead of standard Fluent UI. And I believe one last thing, I will be fast as well, the testability of those components, because whomever knows me knows that I'm a little bit freak on testability. To mock it, it's very easy. It's just one entry in module mapper, which, so actually two. Works great with identity proxy. If you are interested in the sample, you will find a unit test on, actually quite interesting one, how to get private methods of components in your unit test. Not very common scenario to test, and yet quite common scenario to implement. So I hope you'll find it useful as well. And I believe that would be all from my side. I spoke very, very fast.
No,
so
Marcin, it's all good. Now, one thing what I actually want to get back, because something what you did on the start, but you went so fast on it. Can you explain what the debugging thingy was? So how did you do that? Because obviously that's awesome input also for us in engineering side, that maybe we should actually make these things and debugging and implementation more easier. Now, just quickly recap on what Marcin was showing. So in our tutorials, we just show how you build a Teams tab using SPFx. And why would you do that? Well, SPFx has the benefits of automatic hosting and optimized hosting. So you don't have to worry about setting up any Azure applications or anything. And especially if you're hitting APIs in Microsoft 365, you don't need to worry about the backend or hosting or costs related on that. So it's quite a convenient way of doing things. But the debugging has always been the question, and I think what Marcin showed was something magical related on to being able to do debugging directly in the Microsoft Teams. But can we recap on what's happening here?
Yes. This util script that I'm using in my browser, this is something you can get from my GitHub. Let me check, because I'm quite sure I had it open somewhere, maybe. Or maybe not. For sure, it will be available in the resources. And here are a few useful methods, I believe. Debug tab, debug page, and this one, the most recent one, debug web part. It accepts web part ID, as you could see here, debug web part. This, and as I mentioned, this web part ID is.
Oh, sorry, Marcin. Can you zoom in? Jim is asking. Can we slightly zoom in, if possible? Excellent. Oh, now it's good. Now it's good.
I can even hide this one. Yeah. Okay, and now we are looking in Teams context, Teams app context, embedded page container iframe. And this is my private thing. It's by any means not fully supported by Microsoft, because this might change. But as long as it won't change, it will work. So basically, this will find the iframe of any of this tab. The important thing is that this tab should be a SharePoint page, any SharePoint page. As you can see, for this purpose, I'm using my homepage from this theme, but I have some other web part here that, as you can see, just boilerplate, and it will work here as well, because there is an iframe element with that name here. Then I'm replacing the tab URL, or the tab source, with, first of all, Teams logon page, then with hosted up page. Those are system pages that Teams are. So this is a system page that Teams is using to ensure authentication. Then Teams hosted up actually loads the SharePoint framework to the page and enables you to open and load this component. You can even go a little bit further on that concept. And I actually blogged about this page quite a lot. You can not only provide component ID, but if you can also debug basically any web part you have from any page in your entire intranet, and it will work quite nicely. This is also a nice way you can introduce the pre-configured web parts as your personal apps, but this is also a whole other topic that maybe someday we will talk a little bit more about. But yes, basically it's switching URL to predefined URL, relatively simple. If you ever use SPFx, I'm sure you are familiar with this part. So the whole magic is figuring out this part of the URL. And thanks to that, as I mentioned, you can debug your web part without deploying, need to deploy it beforehand. And I believe additional and the biggest advantage is that if you are using this in team start context, you can automatically start development with the team's context in mind and in your code. So quite useful. Especially here, it was useful for theme, because the other way I would have to take theme, I don't know from where, and check what are the values. By the way, here is also a nice unit test how to test your code against switching the themes. So
absolutely.
That's it.
Cool. Thank you, Marcin, on that one. And just a kind of a recap on what we're doing there. We're executing the JavaScript in the console of the browser. And then we're swapping the frame to point to the dynamic underscore layouts loading page, which is then loading the web part directly within the Microsoft theme. So really, really cool setup and streamlining the development for sure. It's absolutely brilliant stuff. This absolutely helps people to do development more efficiently. So, of course, Marcin, you don't necessarily even understand the value of all of this because you're doing this on a day-to-day basis. But for, I think, a lot of the people in this call, this is like, okay, so this is exactly what we've been looking for to enable development and debugging directly in Teams. So really cool. And
thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thanks, Marcin. And maybe a side note on that one, this is absolutely something what we as a Microsoft should look into doing more natively within a product as well, but really good feedback. Awesome stuff. Cool. Thank you, Marcin. Now, the next one, Gary, you should be now ready to go, unless I'm completely mistaken.
I am good. I have audio, I have microphone, which assuming you can hear me.
No, we can't hear you, so it's all good. So, no, just kidding. We can't hear you. Okay. Take it away.
Thank you very much. I guess this session is what we're going to show you is how you can run the CLI for Microsoft 365 in Docker. So a little bit about me. So my name is Gary Trinder. I'm a solutions architect in the UK. I work for a gold partner called CPS. I'm also part of the PnP team and one of the maintainers of the CLI for Microsoft 365. Just find my GitHub profile and you'll be able to find where I am on the internet. So CLI for Microsoft 365, so you may have heard of it, don't really maybe know what it is, but essentially it's a cross-platform tool that allows you to manage all different services in Microsoft 365. You can run on basically any shell is what we're achieving here completely across the board. If you want to use Bash, if you want to use PowerShell, you can use the CLI. So just to kind of start of, well, how has this all come about? Why are we even talking about this thing called Docker and CLI for Microsoft 365? Well, as part of the project, we like to get feedback from people, and we did get some feedback, which was great. So we have GitHub discussions, and we had some feedback to say, wouldn't it be great if actually you could bundle the CLI using Docker, so that basically it makes it easy for people to be able to download, use it, and it was an interesting concept. We'd not considered it, so we had a really good discussion in the GitHub discussions, and we kind of agreed, okay, yeah, we'll do it. So it sounds pretty good. So we decided we're going to build this out in the open, completely shipped it. So, there we are from the time that we actually agreed, from the suggestion by Alexander, who put that forward. We raised the issue and then we actually released it in a few months. And I thought that was pretty good for us to turn that around because it was something that was pretty new. So what is Docker? Why have we even done this? So Docker allows us to effectively build and package the CLI with all of its dependencies, everything that it needs to run, give a mechanism to ship that out to people, then allow you to run that on your machine, on your servers, on your local machine, or even in kind of like DevOps agents in Azure DevOps. So Docker helps you build, ship your application out, and then just run it so that you as an end user, consumer of that application, you don't have to worry about installing anything because we ship everything that you need. So that first part, the build part is a Docker image. So this is a Docker file. This represents our image, which is our bundle, which basically allows us to define an operating system. It allows us to define some environment variables, create users in there, and actually run some kind of like post installation scripts as well. So one of the things with the CLI, because we can run everywhere, we can run in Bash and we can run in PowerShell, we have to handle the peculiarities, if you like, the setup of working in those different shells. So this allows us to do that for you, whereas previously you'd have to kind of install and then go through and configure things yourself. So what is in our image? Well, we've got Linux in there. So we're using Alpine Linux, which is, if you kind of come across Ubuntu, think of Ubuntu, but very, very, very small. It basically just gives us everything that we need from the Linux side to run the CLI. We bundle Node.js in there with the CLI, so you don't need Node installed on your machine. You don't need to worry about, am I running the right version of Node, because we've provided it for you. And alongside Node, you get NPM with that. We've also bundled PowerShell in the image, so you can use PowerShell and PowerShell 7. So if you're on a machine that's running PowerShell 5 and you don't want to install PowerShell 7, we can provide that for you. We've got Bash in there as well. That comes with Linux. And what we also do is we actually configure the auto completion for you as well. So with CLIs, if you ever use the Azure CLI, doing the kind of the setting up autocomplete is kind of like a post step that you've got to do. It can be a bit tricky depending on which shell you're using. So again, we've provided that in the image. So how are we going to ship this to you? Well, we take our images and we push them up to Docker Hub. So if you're using NPM, it's like a package manager, but for Docker images. We publish a new version every time we release. So every time there's a new beta version of the CLI, every time there's a new monthly release, a new version of our image is available for you to use. And the other side of it, the Docker engine, this is something that you'd install on your machine, and this would allow you to then actually pull down those images and execute them on your machine. So you're pulling down all the dependencies. It creates an isolated environment on your machine. So again, if you've got other versions of Node installed already, you don't have to worry about them conflicting and changing different versions to be able to use it. You'll use the version that we supply you with, which is great for us because that means that we can target a specific version using this. And then you don't have to worry about, have I got the right version? Do I need to update? All those kind of things. So to get started, there is a dependency still. You need to install Docker. So if you go to the Docker website, there's loads of instructions in there. It's really easy to get set up on Windows. That's all you need to do. Just install the Docker desktop, and that installs the engine for you. So once you've done that, you're basically ready to pull down this image and start using the CLI. So I'm going to jump into the demo. So I've got Docker running on my machine. So this is kind of like the Docker desktop. So a container is basically a running instance of an image. I've not got anything running at the moment. I don't have any images download. It's completely empty. If I go into PowerShell, I can start to run commands, use the Docker CLI to basically, instruct Docker to basically install things. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use this command, so Docker run, and these switches, I'll go through what they mean in a second, but I can give the name of the image and also the version that I want to run. So all of the different versions, they're appended at the end as tags after the colon. So, if I wanted the beta version, I could just type next in there. But what we're going to do is we're going to run the latest 365. There we go. So what this is doing now, this is going to Docker Hub. It's picking out the image and it's downloading it, and it downloads it in layers. So a Docker image is layered as an operating system, a user account, basically all the steps that were in that Docker file before. So it allows us to separate things out, and it allows us to, if there's a new image that you want to download, say the next version, it will just swap out the image that's changed, so you don't have to download everything again. So what this has done, this has executed the image. So this is now a running container, and you can see I am actually in this in this container. I am in Linux effectively, and I'm in a bash command. If I run M365, you can see that we have the CLI that is actually running in there. So we know that we have Node installed, and we have npm installed as well. Now, what we can do is we can also switch to PowerShell really quite easily. So now we've just jumped across, and we've kind of been in a shell inside a shell. So if now I want to write some PowerShell commands, I can as well, which is really nice, easy way of being able to just interact with the CLI. I'm just going to exit out of this. So when I exit out of this container, there is, I'll come back to this in a second, and I'll explain it. If I exit out of this, it's going to exit out of PowerShell. I'm going to exit out of Bash. It stops the container completely from running, and that is the RM switch at the beginning. It basically says when you've stopped the session, just close it down. So that means that basically anything that was done inside that container is just gone. That instance has now disappeared. It's freed up other resources on your machine. Now, if I didn't want to go into Bash and just go into PowerShell, I can add the shell at the end of what I want to launch into. So I've already got this image installed. I want to go straight to PowerShell. It's going to go straight in, doesn't have to download it again. It's already there. It's given me my new container, and I can start to use the CLI. So I've got M365 here. There's the commands. And one of the things which I mentioned is you've now got autocomplete. So I can then tab, and I can see all the different options, which is something which from a CLI point of view, we do miss. I'm conscious that I am quickly running out of time. So that's a very quick way of how to get started. If you want more information, this is all documented on the CLI docs. We're going into lots more detail about how you can pass in environment variables, how you can run scripts that are on your host machine, because the Docker container is completely isolated. It can't talk to your host machine. So if you want to run scripts in there are ways of doing that, and that is documented. If you're really interested in using this in DevOps, so maybe you're in Azure DevOps, what I would suggest is there's a great article by Yannick Rietmans, who was very kind to help us out with delivering these Docker images. He was able to test these images in Azure DevOps. There were a few things that we needed to configure to get it to work in there. Definitely check that out if you're interested in using that in your DevOps pipelines. And like I said, right at the very beginning, this all came about because of feedback. So we would absolutely love your feedback, whether it's on this, whether it's an idea you've got. Please come to the discussions on the repo, create a new discussion. Let's have a chat, and let's see where we can go with it. And thank you very much.
Excellent stuff. And excellently on the time as well. So thank you, Gary, on that one. We're trying to be strict on the timings because people need to move to another meeting as well and all of that. But really, really cool stuff. I love the shell in the shell reference as well. So anyway, have a look on that. We'll add all of the links and notes on the blog post summary, which is coming out tomorrow. We do not have a time on Q&A. That's always happening in the chat. Just a word of a warning for the future as well. We can't unfortunately do audio questions during these calls because there's 180 up to 300 people in the call. So we cannot go to individual audio questions. That's why the chat and accessing the chat is super important. Now, the recording will be available in the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel within 20 24 hours. It's typically in 18 hours or so, but it promises it 24 hours with an SLA. The next M365 General Dev call is on March 4th, and then the next SharePoint Framework community call is from week from now. So we kind of have always a call on Thursdays at 7 a.m. Pacific time. If you're interested on any of the other community calls, which we have, there's quite a few of them. So select which of them you're interested and which of them you want to actually join. So quick kind of maybe a teaser. We're looking into consolidating some of these calls and consolidating some of the messaging and making it sure that it's more Microsoft 365 platform level. More on that whenever we get all the plans sorted out. But that's all we kind of covered today. Thank you for the demo presenters. Thank you for the attendees. Thank you for the lively discussion in the chat. And thank you for your feedback on open source and the product stuff. So, but let's stay in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.